If you're like me, you love color. And you might be surprised to know that you can mix colored pencils just like you would with paint. We'll use 6 colored pencils to make a color wheel with all the colors of the rainbow. Let's start with some color terminology. You've probably heard the word hue, and it's hard to know, does that mean dark or light? Hue is just color. So when I mention a hue, I'm just talking about a color. So the hue of this is red. Here's a blue hue and a yellow hue. That leads us right into another term, primary colors. What are they? Primary colors are red, blue, and yellow. I think of them as the Fisher-Price colors. They're the colors that can't be made from other colors, and they're the basis of everything on the color wheel. Secondary colors are made from a combination of 2 primaries. So if we mix blue and yellow, we get green. If we mix red and blue, violet. And red and yellow make orange. There's a fun way to remember them. It is Christmas, Easter, and the Denver Broncos. You'll never forget it now. In this lesson, we'll be working on a color wheel, a visual chart of colors that will help us see how color theory actually works. The next term I want to introduce you to is a color complement, and what that actually can do. A color complement is an opposite on the color wheel. It can brighten or dull colors depending on how it's used. Another color term is analogous color. These are near neighbors on the color wheel, so they're the ones that border each other. When we use them together, we can make something lighter and brighter. When we jump across the color wheel, we'll back in the complements, and that's how we dull colors down. Understanding color relationships helps us predict our results when drawing or painting with color. We're going to break down our 3 basic colors into 2 each. We'll have 2 reds instead of 1, 2 blues, and 2 yellows. These biased colors give us a red that is a tomato red. We're going to call that an orange red because we see more orange in that color. We have a violet red that's more of a raspberry red. It leans toward violet, but it's still red. In our blues, we have a green blue. You can always identify that as kind of a turquoise color. And a violet blue that leans a little bit more toward purple. I think of these as the sea and the sky. And in the yellows, we have a green yellow, more like a lemon, and an orange yellow. It's more like a school bus. We're breaking down these colors because it will help us be really precise in the exact results we get when making those secondary colors, tertiary colors, and every level of color beyond. Here's a pencil chart I made to show you that it doesn't matter what brand you're using, you can find these colors in any colored pencils. So don't get hung up on having any specific brand. In these 6 different brands, I've shown you an orange red, again, that's the tomato, a violet red, more like a raspberry, a violet blue, like the sky, a green blue, like the sea, a green yellow, like a lemon, and an orange yellow, like a school bus. Keep that in mind, and you can't go wrong with colors. So you've picked out your 2 reds, 2 yellows, and 2 blues, and you've got this color wheel sheet in your class materials. We're going to make our own color wheel so we can see exactly what our color pencils will do. We'll start on the outer ring, and the first pencil we'll need is a violet red. Remember, it's the one that looks like a raspberry. So we'll start with our violet red, filling in the color wheel. It'll give us great practice with our pencil strokes. The first pass that I'll make is through the center of this violet red section, right under the words violet red. I'm not too worried about beauty at this point. I just want to get a little bit of color onto the page. You'll notice I haven't gone all the way to the edges because I'm going to now follow up with our eyelash stroke. This will give us my color wheel a 3D effect. I'm planting the pencil along the line at the bottom and drawing it in with a flick of the wrist to have a little bit more color at the edges. See how it fills in that white area? Pretty easy. When I get to the top, I can do the same pencil stroke, just pulling it toward me. I'm remembering to rotate my pencil so I stay on a nice point. Now you'll see that I've missed some areas where I can see white through my pencil strokes. Easy enough, I can just go back and add a few more pencil strokes to fill it right in. So there's our violet red. Let's move on, going clockwise around the color wheel, to our violet blue. We'll do the same thing. Now, I'm going to turn the paper so it's a comfortable pencil stroke for me. Never try to draw at a strange angle. I'll start the same way with just a pass through the center. Now I'm using that eyelash stroke to create my 3D effect. This blue is definitely a violet blue. It's going to help me anytime I want to bring violet into a color mix. All blues have an element of violet in them and an element of green. Every blue. This one has more of the violet, less of the green. All set. Now we'll reach for our green blue. When I put this one next to the violet blue, you'll definitely see the difference. They're both blues, but they're really not the same color at all. A green blue has a larger proportion of green in it and a much smaller proportion of violet. This is kind of the color of the ocean in my mind. And when I want to bring green into a mix, this is the blue that I'll reach for. I'm working it exactly the same way with a light pass through, followed by these eyelash strokes. Take your time with this. Colored pencil isn't a fast medium, and you'll get much better results if you work at a slow and steady pace. This is a great way to practice all those pencil strokes we were learning before. They'll come in handy when we start working on our drawings. We've got our green blue, and when we compare it to the violet blue, we can really see a difference. Our next pencil is that green yellow. It looks kind of like the color of a lemon. Now when you're marking with the yellows, they're a lighter hue. So you'll feel like you want to press harder, but avoid the urge. We want to keep our pressure consistent throughout. I'll start with that same pass, and I'll just do the exact same process with eyelashes. I won't see it as well on its own, but in the context of the whole color wheel, it'll really make sense. Remember to keep turning your pencil as you work. That'll keep you up on a nice point. This is our lightest value. A value is lightness and darkness. So the hue is yellow and the value is light. There's green yellow. Let's take a look at our next yellow. This one is the orange yellow of a school bus or a tractor. When you start marking this one on the page, you'll see a lot more pigment. It's a darker value of the hue yellow. And you can see that orange component in the yellow. If you go a little outside the lines, don't worry. This is just a tool for you to use. We probably won't frame it and hang it in a museum. There we go. Orange yellow. We just have one more color to use. The last color in this outer ring of the color wheel is orange red. This is the red of a tomato. It has a definite leaning toward orange, but you'd still describe it as a red. We're all set. We have our outer ring of colors. You can see that we have red, blue, and yellow. We've just divided them into 2 separate reds, 2 separate blues, and 2 separate yellows. But we can bring them back together again. Now the fun starts. In the center of the wheel, we're going to do some mixing. We'll start with these primary colors. So to get that medium red, we're going to use our violet red and our orange red mixed together. It won't matter too much which one you start with. So I'll start with the orange red. Now I'm going to work in this pie piece that says red, and I'm going to make first just a pass of light color. This red matches the orange red hue. It's just a lighter value, meaning it's a lighter tint. I'm changing now to the violet red, and right over that orange red, I'll add a layer, just as light. We're always going to build colored pencil layers in light layers with sharp pencils, and you'll see the colors start to melt together. I'm changing back to the orange red, and I'm going to do this a couple of times until I get a nice smooth mix of these 2 reds. My objective here is to get a red on the inner ring that isn't the same as either of the reds on the outer ring. Well, this looks pretty good to me. It doesn't lean too much toward the orange red or toward the violet red. It's sort of its own color. What we have is that primary red that you think of when you think of red, blue, and yellow. Now, when I look at mine, it's still leaning a little bit toward the orange red. I can fix that in a jiffy with 1 more layer of violet red. There we go. I have a perfect blended red. What this tells us is that, in fact, within that simple primary red, we always will find both orange red and violet red. Let's see what we can do with the blues. We'll want our violet blue and our green blue to mix together to get what you might think of as royal blue. I'll start with the green blue. Either one is really okay. You just have to lay something down first. So once again, with just the green blue down, it matches the green blue on the outer ring. When I add a layer of violet blue, that color starts to shift. Do you see what I mean? Just like with the reds, I'm going to shift back and forth a couple of times, creating light layers that give me a blue that is entirely different than either the violet blue or the green blue. The hardest thing is knowing when to stop. If I pause for a minute and look back at this, I think I've just about got it. I think I'll let that be my primary blue. Let's move on to the yellows. Our 2 yellows are the green yellow and the orange yellow. I bet you know what's about to happen. I put down 1 layer of the green yellow. Now I'm using the orange yellow. You'll see this yellow jump back and forth between looking kind of orange and looking more green, but in a really short amount of time, I'm going to end up with that medium yellow that I'm looking for. Here we go. I can see it coming up. We've got our yellow, blue, and red. Next, we're going to go to the secondary colors. In order to make a nice green, I'm going to need some blue and some yellow. To make a bright green, I'm going to choose the blue with the most green in it, the green blue, and the yellow with the most green in it, green yellow. Let's see what happens. I'll start with the yellow and lay down 1 light layer. You can probably barely see it, but it's there. I'm switching now to my green blue. It's a darker staining pencil, so I am lightening my touch just a little bit. Colored pencil never looks like much until it's finished, so don't have a big expectation of perfection until you've really worked these colors together. There we go. Now it's turning green. I can still see both the blue and the yellow, but I'm starting to get a nice green mixture. I'm pretty happy with this green, so I'm just going to stop there. I could keep building it all day and it would just get brighter and brighter. We're ready to make our orange. I'm going to choose orange yellow and orange red. They'll make the brightest orange. I think I'll start this time with my yellow. Again, I'm working in light layers, going back and forth between the red and the yellow. When you have two colors that have different levels of darkness or value, like the red and yellow, you have to be careful not to overdo either one. So I'm trying to keep the same pressure on the pencils, even though my yellow feels like it wants me to press harder to get something out of it. In just a couple of layers, I'm starting to see my orange come through. I'll add one more layer of red, and I'm going to top it off with yellow just to make that orange really pop. There we go. There's a nice bright orange just from one yellow and one red. The last segment we have is violet, and I bet you can guess. We'll want our violet red and our violet blue to make the best violet. Now, here's a tip on violets. I always like to start with the blue and add just a little bit of red. So I'll probably have several layers of blue and maybe just one layer of red. It's easy to muck up a violet, so this will keep you on the straight and narrow. This violet blue happens to have a lot of violet in it, so it won't need much red to change the hue. With just that little bit of red, that may do it for my violet. Let's see how it looks. I think I'll add one more touch and call it a violet. There we go. We've got the whole color wheel finished. The outer ring is this color straight from the pencils, the inner ring all layered and mixed. One last thing I like to do is make a note of which pencils I used. So down at the bottom of your color wheel, you'll see the name of the pencil, the color name we've been using. I can write in the color name of the pencil I actually used, and I like to make a little swatch of the color just to remind me. We're going to use this wheel to help us make color selections for mixing all the other colors. Let's start with greens. We have our color wheel with all these colors, but you don't often see colors out in the world that look just like this. We need to further shift these colors. For instance, if you're working on a leaf, you really wouldn't want it to be that bright green. So let me show you how to use the color wheel as a reference to make a whole variety of greens that will be far more natural. I have a page of color recipes here. That's sort of my term for color mixes, and it's just like recipes in a cookbook. Once you've made them, and if you've made good notes, you can make them again. Creating color recipes is an important way to remember your mixes. It's important too that we write down exactly what we did, because I wouldn't remember what I did 5 minutes later, much less 6 weeks later. For instance, if I want a bright, vibrant green, I'll do what we did on our color wheel before. I'll select the green blue, that's the blue with the most green in it, and the green yellow, the yellow with the most green. When I mix them together, I got that same bright green again. On my color recipe sheet, I started with the blue, so I noted that down first. Then I used the yellow, made a little swatch to remind me. And the dots indicate how many layers. So what this tells me is that I went blue, yellow, blue, yellow. 2 layers of each of those colors to get that nice bright green. But let's say I'm really looking at a leaf and I want to create a more natural green. Maybe it's that kind of spring green that's a little bit lighter in color. I would start with my green blue, keeping in touch with the blue with the biggest green content, but I'll skip over green yellow and now I'll use orange yellow. So I'm using a blue and a yellow, but I'm mixing them up. When I create that combination, you'll see that I get a slightly duller green than my first neon kind of green, but it's a much more natural look. In the same way, if I needed a darker, bluer green, maybe like for a holly leaf, I would select my other blue. I'm going to use the violet blue that has less green in it, but I think I'll stick with the green yellow that has the most green, and I'll get this kind of green, kind of a dark blue green. Just by switching up the blue, I get such a different result. If I start with the violet blue that has the least amount of green and add orange yellow, which has the least amount of green, I'm going to get this very dull, dark green. Now, when I say dull, I don't mean boring. I just mean not as bright. You'll see this green often in autumn leaves just before they turn color. But those aren't all the options that I have with these blues and yellows. In fact, all of the green dots on this page were made with just 2 blues and 2 yellows. I can use 1 blue and both yellows. I could use both yellows and 1 blue. I'll get a slightly different result every time I mix colors. If I mix both blues and both yellows, I'll get a nice bright green, just as though on the color wheel I had mixed the center blue and the center yellow, because those are the colors I used. If I just change the order, I get a completely different green. The same 4 pencils made both of these greens, but here I used blue first and here I used yellow first. Color order makes a big difference when you're mixing with colored pencils. In this bottom row, I have just flipped the order of the 3 dots at the top, and I got myself 3 brand new colors of green. You can see how a color recipe sheet really helps you. When I go back with another leaf, all I have to do is hold it over these green dots and I'll know exactly where to start. It's very easy to muddy your colors if you don't consider the mix that you're making with your color wheel. So always keep that color wheel handy and it'll get you to the right place the first time. Color in this form, in pigmented form, works with subtraction. So we think of adding blue and yellow and getting a green, but what we're really doing is taking something away. This can be a little confusing. Think about theater lights. When you cast a yellow light and a blue light, you get a puddle of green light. In light, color is additive, but in pigment, it is subtractive. So when I moved away from the brightest yellow, the green yellow, and the brightest blue, the green blue, I was actually subtracting something. I do that by adding a little bit of complement. So think about this. Violet and yellow are complements. Blue and orange are complements. So I got a duller result. When we make complements, we're effectively taking something away. Print up some color recipes for yourself and use your worksheets to play with different combinations of blues and yellows to see how many types of bright and dull greens you could make by just mixing different combinations of those simple blues and yellows. Be sure to notate the colors that you used so that you can make them again without starting over. Like everything we do, it's a matter of practice. In the next lesson, we'll learn how to use our color knowledge to adjust color even further.